Sorry, I don't speak Spanish. I did actually live in Spain for a year in Valencia. It was really nice. Especially the weather. So, so I'm going to talk today about my games. So I make hardware games. So it's like a weird like intersection between like video games, toys, and installation art. And I'll show some of the games I've built, and then go briefly into like where you can make them, how, and then a bit into depth about like one of my games, Line Wobbler, which is also shown there, and I'll show that in a second again, or in a couple of minutes, I guess. So we'll see how far we get with this today. So I'm also going to give an extended version of this talk tomorrow at Esne, that's right, at university here. And I'm also going to show two of the games at the Be My Human party on Saturday. And that's really why I'm here. And now I've been roped into all these talks. But yeah, so that's me. I'm from Germany originally. I've been in London for 12 years now. Also, if you don't understand what I'm saying or like some words are weird, then just let me know right away and I can talk a bit slower or something. I studied computer science and artificial intelligence for a while. Then I went into mobile games while that was still possible, and now it's kind of too crowded. And I started making experimental hardware games mostly as a hobby at first, like in game jams and so on. And it's slowly kind of taking over my life, so I do this full time now. And I'm kind of talking a bit about how that happened as well. But first, I'm gonna talk about some of my games. So it's mostly like videos of my stuff. So this is like one of the first games I built. It's called 12 Sliders. It's only 8 sliders because I was too lazy to build the last 4. But this is enough. And so they have these motorized sliders. So like if you know like these high-end DJ phones, they have these like motorized sliders that can move by themselves. And I said, oh, this is kind of cool. This could be a cool like force feedback thing or like a kind of human-machine interaction thing. So this is a short video here. So that's how they look when they kind of play themselves. And you can also touch them, and then they're touch sensitive, and so you can move them around. And it's basically I build a collection of mini games for that. And these videos and the picture were taken at GDC, the other one, in San Francisco. That's like 4 or 5 years ago, I forget. But they have an exhibit or like an area there called Alt Control GDC, so alternative controllers. And this was also at the first Alt Control GDC, so it's kind of cool to kind of step into this new niche, basically, that has been kind of expanded slowly. And I've shown a game there like every year since, except I think 2 years ago. So it's been kind of my place to show new stuff, basically. And I really enjoy doing that. And it's kind of nice to show you like even really early prototypes. So this is another prototype. This was made at the Global Game Jam. For this one, I went to Switzerland. They did it in a castle there, which was really nice. But here, I used like this rubber band as a sensor. So you can see if I stretch the rubber band, it changes resistance. So that's very easy to measure. And I use an Arduino and feed that into Unity. And so you can see the Unity editor running there. And it's like these little lab things I built. And it looks quite cool and fun to play. But this is also an interesting example of a game maybe that, so I posted about this on Twitter and it did really well. It's like one of my most popular tweets that are not just like lazy memes and stuff. So it was really popular on Twitter, but actually the game itself doesn't really play that well. So like if I give it to someone like that hasn't seen it before, all they do is like they try, maybe it's also to do with the simulation because all they do is like do this, right? So they play it like exactly wrong. But it's also because like, you know, like the trampoline thing is like, you know, you push things upwards. But the fun of the GIF, basically, the video doesn't translate automatically into like a good game experience. So this is like an experiment I did, and I kind of showed it once or twice. And I said, okay, maybe this doesn't quite work. And then also the rubber band is very sensitive. So like if I give it to a kid or, you know, like a drunk person at a party, they will just snap it because like it breaks super easily. So you could maybe like think of like adding some kind of wires so it stops it, but then the simplicity of it gets lost. So it's kind of very tricky to keep this going. But why I'm saying all this is also because not everything I make is going to be a success. In fact, most of them aren't. So it's kind of like a shotgun approach in a way. So like I try a lot of things, and I usually buy these sensors without knowing what I'm going to do with it. So I had this rubber band in my kind of box of like weird things for a year before I said, okay, I'm going to try something with this. And it looked kind of cool, and it was kind of fun. But ultimately, it didn't work out. So maybe I'm going to use it again, because now I know how it works, and like something like some weird wearable thing could be fun, or some other thing. But it's definitely all about the experimentation, and not about the results necessarily. And that's kind of the game jam mantra anyway. And I think this one goes into the same way. This is a game without a display, really. I mean, except the LEDs, maybe. It's called Schrödinger's Litter Box, and it's about finding an invisible cat in a litter box, basically. So there's like this like a touch panel, which is like a touch screen without a screen, basically. And the glove, we put vibration motors in them. So you look around and you're trying to find the cat, and you find it like it starts purring when you get close. So like the glove starts vibrating. So it's basically just finding a random position on this thing. So it's a fairly simple thing, but it's kind of cool with like different sensors. No visual feedback, except, I mean, we put this LED strip so like the audience can see what's going on. So like when you find it, it starts sparkling like this, and then you found the cat, and that's perfect. And so also this game, I made it with Vive, and it was also made on a train. So you can see in the window there, we're actually moving, and this is made at the train jam, which goes from Chicago to San Francisco every year. To the other GDC. And it's like a game jam event. So basically now it's so popular that the entire train is booked out. So like Amtrak has blocked this day. So no one can buy a ticket for this connection on this day, except if you go on this train jam. So if you ever get a chance to go to GDC, the other one, I highly recommend going on train jam. It's not the cheapest, especially if you get the sleeper, which I also highly recommend because, you know, afterwards, you have like 1 week of partying and talks maybe and meeting people. So having a rest is very important. But this is a really cool experience. And it's also like you see the most beautiful parts of America, like, you know, the ones without people. It's really great nature. So it goes through the Rocky Mountains, Death Valley, but like really cool parts, like Colorado River. It's fantastic. This is the most dangerous game I've built. It has a knife. So this is a French kitchen knife on a motor, and you collaborating against the machine. So this is like an experiment. I don't have this for sale or on show. But the goal is like to press as many buttons as you can without being hit by the blade. And so the blade moves kind of semi-randomly. It has a touch sensor, so like. When it detects skin, it starts kind of cutting really fast. Like you'll see it in a like this. So I want to say by design, but kind of coincidentally, the blade isn't sharp enough to cut through skin. So no one whose blade it has been hurt. Like, you know, it's just like it's a bit annoying. But this game is an interesting experiment, like with like playing with the perception of pain, or at least the perceived danger of pain, right? So like. If you see it now, you have no idea how painful it is, and then, you know, it might, for all you know, it might like cut through fingers sometimes. And we consider actually putting some red paint on the woods. But yeah, so it's a bit inconvenient, but it's not really painful. But this was like a really cool experiment, and actually we did show it once at EGX, Eurogamer Expo in London. But I think it kind of flew under the radar of like the organizers because no one asked us to fill any health and safety forms. And I don't know if you've been to the UK, but they're all about the health and safety forms. It's like, yeah. So that was cool. That was a really nice experiment. But yeah, I'm also kind of keen not to show it again. It's like, you know, inevitably maybe something goes wrong. But this is also a nice freedom you have when you experiment with these games, like to do things that are not necessarily safe. Like, you know, you just make an experiment. You can ask your friends to play it, but then obviously, I mean, maybe if in America you get sued, but like, you put a plaster over it, and it's probably going to be fine. But these kind of experiments are kind of what I really enjoy doing, even though they're maybe not the most commercial prototypes. So this is a game I'm working on right now. It's called Baumgarten, and it's a lot of springs. Like there are actually doorstopper springs. I don't know if you have them. We don't have them in Spain, I think, and they also don't exist in Germany. But in the UK and the US, they're very common to stop doors from hitting the wall. And there, for some reason, there's springs. But like in those two cultures, like kids, when they grow up, they have this, all of them, like that I've asked, have played with these doorstopper springs, and they go brrr. I have a video of this later as well. And I decided to make a game around this because it's a very tactile experience. And it also, like Line Wobbler over there has a spring as well. And that was like the first inspiration. This is kind of a spiritual sequel in a way. So you can touch them, they're touch sensitive, and they also vibration sensors. And I have a series of little interactions on there. So I'm still kind of figuring out actually what the interactions are. So I have like a couple mini games, I have some musical experiences. Some are just interactive and they don't really have a purpose. You can play this on Saturday if you're coming to the party. And it's just like a prototype. I'm going to see where this is going to go. That's kind of what I'm working on now. Yeah, just a very brief interlude about hardware itself. So it's very easy to get started these days with hardware. It's ridiculously easy sometimes. So like, for example, the Makey, and I think there's also a Makey game on at the party, right? It's a thing where you don't need to know how to program at all. So you basically have this little thing, and you have cables that you connect, for example, to like a banana, and then the banana becomes a key. And then the other end you plug in a computer, and the thing is a keyboard, right? So if you press the banana, it's just the left. You have another banana for right, and then suddenly you can play a game with them. And that's already an alternate controller, right? So like you don't need to use bananas, you can use people as well. Anything that basically has some conductivity, like moisture, works, like water. So it's a really easy way to get started. And then there's like things that are getting a bit more difficult, like the little bits are just like snap together little pieces of like sensors and stuff. It's getting cheaper as well. The Raspberry Pi starts from $4 for a full Linux computer. It has also like pins to put in things. Easy to buy, better hardware. So like there's Kickstarters that for all kinds of devices, more powerful devices. And the communities is really important as well. So like there's online communities. So like when I make a new game or a new thing, when I want to use a new sensor and I have no idea how to use it, I just Google, like Arduino, and then let's use a pressure sensor, right? For like air pressure. And they say, oh yeah, you should buy this one. It's the cheapest, and you can buy it here. Here's some example code. You connect these pins to pin, whatever, 10 and 12. And then you press run, and it already does things. So you can lift it up or bring it up the stairs, and the number changes. And then, you still need to think of a cool game or like an idea, but that's like, the case with everything. So it's very easy to get started. Offline communities are great as well. So there's maker spaces. So whenever I work on a game, I work from the London Makerspace. It's basically a communal workshop where they have laser cutters, 3D printers, and most importantly, people with knowledge about those, right? So I didn't know anything about hardware when I started. I don't have a degree in electrical engineering or anything. It's just like reading about it and then asking people. So it's very simple. Yeah, briefly where these games made. I mean, there isn't really a central authority on these games, or like no central hubs for these games. So like you can make them anywhere you like. I mean, obviously it helps to have like some people who know what they're doing on the side, so like makerspaces are good. But then also just game jams in general have more and more people experimenting with these things. So this is again on the train, and this is like my box of hardware that I bring to these. So like usually without any idea what I'm going to use at this jam, so I can just go online and like buy these sensors. So like for example, this one here is an ultrasonic distance sensor. So it can measure the distance. It gives you a reading in centimeters. It goes from like 4 meters to like maybe 6 centimeters. So that's already an interesting thing to play around with, and like you can, especially in a confined space, it could be quite interesting to do something with that. And LED rings. I think these are very similar to the ones I used in the Baumgarten. But yeah, so that's like how you get started. And then, I mean, it helps to have internet to look for questions. That's I think the train jam doesn't really have, because like in the barren wastelands of rural America, there's no mobile connection. So it's a bit tricky, but it's possible. So like the final part of my talk is about Line Wobbler, and that's the probably one of my most popular games. And I've set it up over here, and now I'm probably going to just go over and switch it on. So I'll just give you a brief demo. It's a very simple game in a sense. So it runs on this 5 meter long LED strip, and it's not a normal LED strip, so it's individually addressable. It's like a screen, but only 1 pixel wide. And I have this spring here that has an acceleration sensor inside, so it measures bend the spring. And when we made this at a game jam, so this was initially made at a game jam. So I knew I wanted to do something with a spring, so I had this idea before, and you'll see the reason why in a minute. So I brought the spring, and then a friend of mine had the LED strip, and said, okay, if we put the two together, what will happen? What can we do? And it's sort of just like me putting like a light as a debug output, like, oh yeah, the spring moves, we can see it. But then when you wobble the spring, it gets kind of fuzzy and like a bit violent, you know, like, oh, if it's violent, maybe there should be enemies. So like if you have enemies, and what else can you do? You can move forward and back. And so you can see on the red here, these are enemies. So if you touch them, you lose. It's quite a nice animation, but it's just like you die. And so then the attack is then this rolling. So it's like a very simple interaction, and we just went from there and see, okay, what else can we do? So like maybe there's different levels. So this is like the first level, and all you can do really is reach the other end. It's like the only place where I can go. So this is like the end of the room. And then, so what else can you do in a 1D environment? So it's very restrictive design space. So, like for example, you can get pushed around. So, like in this one, like, you know, there's like a conveyor belt that pushes you around. And so the first few levels here are like tutorial. So, like it teaches you, you know, like if you keep pushing, at some point you don't get further, so you can push more. So it's like an analog control. And then on the other way, you can push forward and pull this out. I'll switch it on later again, so I don't know how much time we have after the talks. They can play then and also at the party. There's like 10 levels in total. There's a boss fight in the end. There's like a high score table, but it's kind of hard to see because it's only 1D. But yeah, so I mean, like at the game jam, obviously the game wasn't as complex as this, so that was much simpler prototype. But I've spent like the last 4 years working on this, and it's quite polished now. And I'll go over some of the details that went on during the production of this. In fact, I don't have too much time, so I'm going to speed up a little bit. But yeah, so this is just a video of showing the game. I'll skip over this because you've seen this. So I'm going to go over the inspiration and then some of the iterations and then how it went to installation. So this is the inspiration for the controller. So this is actually one of those doorstopper springs, and I was doing research on YouTube, and this cat video popped up, and it's like a cat. It's not my cat, unfortunately. Maybe fortunately, because apparently this cat does it every 5 a.m. in the morning. Reaches under the door, you know, I want to be fed. And it has a really, like, you know, it sounds kind of cool, like a brrrr, but you can imagine. But I said, okay, if the cat can have so much fun, you know, maybe humans can too. And went from there. So that's kind of, I already talked about the design limitations as well. Like, you know, we had only the spring and the LED. I'm going to talk more about this tomorrow. Then, you know, it's also like a 1D game, but it's embedded in the 3D world. So it lives in the 3D space. So then obviously you can play with the LED strip itself. So this was at Berlin, at a maze. Highly recommended, by the way, as an indie festival. It's probably the best in the world for me. I had to go over the people's heads, like behind them even. So like they had to kind of crane their necks, like maybe hurting their necks a little bit, going back to this pain element. But that was kind of fun to see because like normally games don't really extend, you know, just outside the screen. So it's kind of taking the physical world into account. This is probably the coolest installation I've done with this. This was last year at King's Cross Station in London. And I found the right people that I collaborated with, like Games London. And they asked me to make a Christmas tree, a playable Christmas tree with Line Wobbler. So it's like the same game, but 25 meters long, 6 meters tall in this helix shape. And you play the tree, basically. It's kind of hard to play because it kind of goes back and forth. But yeah, the video should continue, but it should be fine. Yeah, it's just a short thing. But that was kind of cool. It was like a pain to set up because it was like, you know, we need to do it when the station was closed, so like 3 in the morning. So you need to go there at night and set everything up. And people would also constantly break it because they're much less, obviously they're much less kind of careful than a museum audience or like maybe even like a games party audience. So it kind of kept constantly breaking. People would run into this thing, maybe like, you know, running for their trains, not looking forward. So like, you can even see it here, but like this was bent from the first day. It's like this metal strip. Crazy. This was underwater. Just my parents' pond. So if it would have kept raining today, we would have seen the same thing. But yeah, so that doesn't really add anything to the game as such. It's just like a cool effect, like a real life shader in a way. And it was kind of a bit more tricky to play. I mean, obviously only the strip itself was underwater, so it actually is waterproof by design. So like you see this like a silicon tube, so just put it underwater and it worked. Yeah, so let's just stop halfway. No, maybe it's all. Okay, see the parts I used. I mean, they're not super important. It's just like maybe you can ask me as well if you need reference for this. But yeah, so just briefly going over this, the design process. So like I started actually with these doorstopper springs, but it turns out they're very weak. So this is an installation in London. It's like a cat playing with it, covered cats. But this is an installation in London which is on right now. But you can, the reason I show it here is like you see these little two kids playing it in a second, and like they're like super violent. They're kind of pushing themselves out of the way. They're screaming loudly. Well, you can't hear it quite. But you can see like I don't know why the video is so early, but like, they're like super violent, like you're pulling it one way or the other. And it turns out like the game isn't sturdy enough for it to survive. So I experimented with different springs. So this is like a shoe tree spring. I don't know if you've seen those. They're like used to straighten leather shoes. This is my grandma's, so I kind of stole it from her. So that works very well, but then it's like very tricky to put this on a table. So I tried with like this piece of wood. So it's not the ideal solution, but then, so what I've found is I need my own springs. And, as a game designer, like, I don't know where to get springs. But it turns out there is a spring factory. Obviously there is, but, you never think about it. So I went to a spring factory. There's one in London called Small Order Springs and Fittings Limited. So not only do they do only springs almost, but also small scale orders only. So that's kind of perfect. It's like a very niche thing. And so they made springs for me. So this is a video of one of the Line Wobbler springs being made. So you can see it's in the beginning. It'll cut off in the end, but probably the video will cut off just before. So I went there, and it took a while to convince them what I wanted, because they've never made things for games before. They make like springs for doors and cars. But then they were super into it. So they told me all about like weird oscillation frequencies and diameters and different steels you can use, and I know a lot about springs now. That's quite cool. But yeah, so then I had like 50 of those springs, and so it turned out it's not too expensive to make. So like I think the hardest or like the most expensive bit is to program this robot that makes these springs. It's like and that was like maybe I don't remember, but like 100 euros. But then each spring is like €1, right? So that's like this upstart cost. So like if I had, I think this was 50 springs. So like each spring worked out to be like £3, like €4. So it's not too bad considered. But if you only want one, obviously it's a bit more pricey. Oh, you saw this video already. This is like a cat in the X space playing with the green light. And eventually I want to put some catnip in the top of the spring, and then have one cat play with the controller, and the other cat is between the place. So that's the ideal goal. And I'm going to skip over this. So scaling up, so you can go in different ways. When you build these things, like you could talk to like toy companies trying to license it, or you go Kickstarter and then big production. What I've been doing so far is like small scale installation art. So I've been showing this at a lot of places. I recently checked. There was like I think it's like 100 places now. I mean, not all of them I've been myself, but like some I just sent the game. And it turns out like when you show it at a lot of places, like people see it. I mean, curators for events see it. And that's how the game has been noticed, and that's how I make my money now. So people have said, okay, we want to show your game and this kids exhibition on interactivity. How much does it cost? And then, coming from mobile games, it's like, oh, maybe $2 is too much, but no, like you have to think higher. Like, how about €500? And they said like 2 minutes later, the email comes back, oh yeah, in this case we take 2. It's like, oh, okay, now I know, how much your budget is. But it's always, and I've been doing this for 3 years now, like with the museums, and you never know. It's like, it's always like kind of guessing a bit, like Googling the museum, how big it is, and then trying to put a number where they say yes, but just, But this is like it's still a new world for me, but I'm like enjoying what I'm doing now, and I'm kind of trying to push to be there in this space. And so far it's been working out. But yeah, I think that's all I have to say. So thanks for that.